Black Rifle Coffee, baby. Breeding fuel.
Look professional, I guess.
Come on, man. Nothing about this is looking professional.
Where are you at?
I'm actually on the road, so we're out campaigning.
I know. How we looking? How we looking out there?
Looking good, looking good. This is my home away from home. So this is the only background. I had another background, but man, the wind kicked up,
Yeah.
and we had to move everything in a little like barn thing. So
This
it's
is
working.
great.
Yeah.
I think it's great. I think it's awesome. Thanks for jumping on with me.
Yeah.
How are we looking out there? Really? How are we looking? Like, how's the campaign trail looking, man?
You know, I'm positive about where we're going to be at. I think, of course, he's going to win. I've been up with him quite a bit. I've had him in Oklahoma a lot. I think she pulls this thing off pretty easy. Bernie Marino in Ohio. The guy's kicking butt, doing what he needs to do. He's up now by 1 point. Remember, Trump's up by 10 in Ohio. So I think Bernie picks up half of those votes.
Okay.
Means Bernie should win by 5, maybe, if the numbers hold. You know, there's a plus or minus 4 points there, so Bernie's going to win either way. And so that puts us at 52 seats in the Senate. As far as Trump goes, man, I've been with him. I was with him most of the weekend, and I'll be with JD tomorrow. I'll be with Trump on Thursday. I think they're going to pull it off. With a vote that we're predicting that the election won't be called until probably Friday morning.
Okay.
But I think we'll know pretty good where we're at Tuesday night.
How far is Sheehy up right now? What's the
Last
spread?
time I saw 7 points.
He's up 7.
Yeah, he's up 7. So he's looking good. The testers in this burn the state down mentality. You know, you're retreating so below the bridge. He's in that. He knows he can't win, so he's trying to get underneath Sheehy's skin. And what I've been telling him is like, brother, just breathe.
Yeah.
You know, don't take the bait. In fact, have a good time. 8 days from now, you're going to be the next U.S. senator from Montana. Just breathe. Don't worry about it. But you know, he's a fighter, and the guy wants to dig in and hold his ground and swing at everything coming after him right now. And I told him, I said, man, you're not in a knife fight. You got the high point. You can just relax, be good.
Yeah. No, don't make any huge swings in narrative or rhetoric. Don't do anything. I mean, I get that. I hit him up and asked him to be on the show a couple weeks ago, but I know he's he's in the middle of it. So I'll wait till after he's elected.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I'll talk to him. I think it'd be a good distraction for him to do the show. No, I really do. I think it'd be good for him to just sit back and shoot the breeze. When I had him here in Oklahoma just last week, that's what I did. He was working the phone, and man, he was going 90-0, and they were digging into his service record. But I was like, really, you're going to dig into Tim Sheehy's service record?
You're gonna dig into Sheehy's service record? I think it's just like Tim Waltz. What are you, crazy?
You can dig into Tim's maybe, but Sheehy, come on, brother. I mean, seriously. But they were digging into it, and it was getting underneath his skin a little bit, and he was prepping for a hot mission, and I was like, hey man, let me talk to you a second. Just take a deep breath, breathe, relax. Let's think about this. Let's figure out how you're going to move forward. And he was, immediately you could see him just kind of change it. But it was getting personal. Coming after his businesses, coming after his wife. They're checking his wife's service records, and that's come after me all you want, kick me in the nuts, whatever you want to do. I can handle it. But you go after my livelihood, you go after my kids, you go after my wife. That's going to get a little personal, and that's why they're doing it, though. They're trying to get underneath his skin because they know that the only way they can beat him is Tim has to self-implode. And he's got, Tim's more disciplined than that. He'll be good.
Yeah, he can't take the bait, right? It's a very common, and it's several thousand years old as far as being able to bait somebody into an ambush and pull them in, with a lighter force, and then you surround them, and ultimately it's their own actions that take away their tactical high ground or their strategic high ground. So right. I see it. It's so interesting because and this is one of the things I want to talk to you about, because, when you went into politics, obviously you're in business for all of your life prior to that point. So moving into politics, like, how dirty is it? Not in the context of like, I want to address this first, which is like, I've known, and I've been really close with a lot of different politicians. And what I've seen is like, dude, they will use any fictional, false, like thread of information, like anything they can to try to get traction. And it's just, it's really underhanded, shady stuff that politicians use.
Here's the difference that I first thing I had to learn is something I already talked about with Tim Shee: learn to breathe.
Right.
Not everything's worth fighting for. Now, there's some things worth fighting for. I've been known to lose my temper before, but I mean, you got to learn to breathe. But in business, there's always an angle in business too.
Yeah.
But most of the time, when people are trying to strike a deal, they're trying to strike a deal to get business to move forward, and so both have an agenda, but they both want to have the winning edge of the negotiations. Mm-hmm. But even at that point, both are looking for a win-win, right?
Yep.
In politics, it's different. In politics, everybody has an angle, and when you turn around, even your own team will hit you in the back. I don't mind getting punched in the face, and I don't mind getting shot at. I hate getting shot at from behind. Those are different, right? Those are total different reactions.
Right.
And in politics, it's a very selfish business. So you have the opposite team that's always looking to get one up on you because they need a talking point or they need to go around you. And then you have your own team that if the person's ambitious and they want to have, they want to use you to gain a little. So what I've said is that people in politics will hurt you a lot to gain themselves a little. So they're willing to hurt you to have 15 minutes of fame, because that 15 minutes of fame means they got a soundbite, and so they're willing to use you and then go past you. Because once they pass you in politics, typically you don't catch up with them. Right. In business, right? We can have a business deal, but I'm looking to expand my business, so I'm going to do business with you over and over and over and over and over again. So you don't really want to burn the bridge, so to say. You want to continue building your network. And it's at some point it's the same, because you got to build relationships. Business, you got to build relationships, and you got to be able to move a product, which is legislation or whatever you want to get done. Well, you got to be able to move a product in business. So you got to understand the avenues. You got to find your niche, and you got to find it. You got to find people that can help you get to where you need to go. That all works, but it's I guess the best I can say is, man, it's like we're walking through a landmine, and then you find some people that are jewels. I mean, you find people that will absolutely, they'll die in the hole with you. I mean, they're not going to go any place. They're your buddies. They're going to lock up, and you know that they're going to fight as hard as you are. And if you go down, they're going down with you. And that when you find those, you hold on to them. And so some of the closest relationships I have outside of my private world in politics are those guys. And those guys I can name I can name about 10 of them. And I mean, that's a lot. I can name 10 of them that I would, what do you say? You call the guy at 2:00 in the morning and say, hey, I need you. And he just says, my car or your car? Mm-hmm.
I'm in business, right? And I love politics in the sense of like, I'm very interested in what's happening, obviously, in my community, in my country. I think it's a constant source of entertainment, depending on what you're reading about. Like, and it also has a direct outcome as far as like being able to directly improve or take away from the improvements in your life. So why did you even think about like, okay, this is the right move for me. This is the right move for my family. What was your calling to go and do that? Why forfeit your freedoms as a businessman to go, flog yourself in the public forum on a regular cycle?
I asked myself the same thing too. No, so we have a saying in our family: "You're never going to change anything you're willing to tolerate." And how that came about was my first company that I bought outside the original company. I had a secretary there that every time I walked in, our main office was in Tulsa, 90 miles Oklahoma City. I'd go there every day, and every time I'd walk into her office, she would just puke issues. I mean, just blah. Everything was a problem, right? And I was it got so frustrating that just like, why are you even here? If I've got to solve all your problems, why do I consider you an office manager? And so she had one of those desk calendars. You know what I'm talking about? The ones that were perfect. You always had something to doodle on, and you always had a place to take notes. I think they were wonderful, but they were cluttered too. And she had just turned the page, so it was fresh, so there wasn't anything wrote on it. And I wrote across it, "You're never going to change anything you're willing to tolerate." And what I meant by that is that you can continue to tolerate these problems, or you can do something about them. And if you don't do something about them, I'm doing something about them. If I'm doing something about them, then I don't need you. That's a manager. There's managers and there's employees, and there's two different things that and they're two different lanes. Both are needed. Both are important. And so back in 2011, we had a company that was called Mullin Environmental, and it was operating. Man, it was running, growing. We had expanded it. We had built a new warehouse. We'd bought a trailer company because we had so much of the products was rolling out. We couldn't buy trailers fast enough, so we were producing our own trailers. We were spraying the fiberglass. We were doing everything. And what we did is we treated water. We could take municipalities that were non-compliant and make them compliant. We could take drill sites and recycle their waters. We had a patent pending on it. My wife and I invested well into 7 figures on the company, and the EPA changed the clean water drinking standard by less than 1%. On Monday, I'm in business. We've been in business for about 18 months with this one company. Right. On Friday, I'm going to have to call everybody and tell them we're going to relocate their place of employment, or they're going to be without a job. I sat there and I thought, if the biggest challenge I have isn't my ability to hire right and fire right, isn't my ability to find a niche, isn't my ability to find financing, or it's some faceless bureaucrat in Washington, D.C., then maybe that's where I need to go. And so my very first political event I ever went to in my life was the one I stood up and said I was running for Congress. I'd never been to a political event. I wasn't one to donate. I was not involved in politics at all. And if I had known what I was getting myself into, I may not have done it because the next 4.5 years of my life was just unbelievable. I mean, when I first started raising money, one of my largest accounts, actually my 2 largest accounts, I lost because they were Democrats. I didn't know it because I never hired anybody based on how they voted. Right. We went through 3.5 years of being audited. My company was audited by the IRS and the Department of Labor for 3.5 years. They left literally the day President Trump was sworn into office. I mean, just you can imagine the attorney bills and the CPA bills that you rack up for 3.5 years of being audited. Not one thing. They didn't find a single thing, nothing. And so if I knew I had to go through that, not sure I would have done it. But now that I'm down the road from it, I'm glad I did. But that's what led me to politics. I simply, in a small segment, you can say I got fed up and, and I ran.
I find you to be extremely authentic, and you approach most, I think, any interview or anything that I've heard you say, like you approach it from a very common sense. You're not speaking from political sound bites, which is one thing that I really appreciate, because I think it's really important for politicians to be able to speak the same language that regular people speak. And when I say that, it's like half the time politicians are so afraid to say something where they're going to be taken out of context, and or they're going to be taking they're going to be taken in context, but they can't say anything. So all of their rhetoric is just bullshit, for a lack of a better term. Like it's what it is, and people are fed up with it, man. Like they're just like, just talk to us. Like these are constituents. These are people. Like I serve coffee every day. I was downstairs literally before this interview, and I made a customer a cup of coffee. I talk to him like a human being because I'm a human being.
You know what most people, what most politicians do is they try to relate with everybody. There's nothing wrong with relating them, but trying to relate with them by trying to be something you're not. I mean, it'd be better for you to show up at a rodeo in a suit and tie if you've never wore boots and jeans before, because you look like an idiot when you wear boots for the first time. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
If you've never been on a ranch and you're going on a farm tour, don't show up, and I'm not making fun here of you, but don't show up in a flannel shirt with your sleeves rolled up and a brand new pair of gloves shoved in your back pocket and pointed toe boots. You just be who you are, and anybody can relate to that. But for me, what I tell people is, like, we all make decisions based on two things, right? And I don't care who you are, you make decisions based on two things: the way you're raised and your life experiences. The way I was raised will never change, and the way we were raised will never change. And you can use it for strength, or you can use it for an excuse. That's up to you. You know, I pull as for strength. Our life experiences are always changing, and so if you're just living your life and you're doing things for the right reason, for me, I wouldn't be here if, one, I didn't get fed up, and two, man, I didn't feel like the Lord actually called me to do it. I'm not saying I'm a good Christian guy. I'm the biggest hypocrite you probably ever met. But I fight to be a good guy every day, and I make mistakes every single day. I didn't get saved until I was later in life, and as you can see, my mistakes are public now. So I'm not saying I'm perfect, but I always try to keep those things in line. For me, though, the best thing is I'm honored to have the position. I don't need the position.
Right.
So if I don't need it, I don't have to sit there and try to be somebody for the sake of keeping my job. The minute I do that, Evan, I'm done. I just want I want to do my very best. I want to go out, work hard, do what I can, and at some point, if it's not enough, then I'll come back and get my life back. Man, I'll spend time out on my ranch, and I'll be happy. Working cattle is the best day of my life, even though language is when I need to pray afterwards, because some reason when I work cattle, I become a different human being, is what my wife and kids tell me. But I still enjoy it.
I find it refreshing, man, just to have conversations with people like, and this isn't name dropping. I was talking to somebody in June, like Don Jr. and I've been friends for a long time, like before his dad was running, and he's been on the show a couple times. He's a friend. And the reason I like to specify this is because I was friends with him before this was a political family, and before, you know, Donald Trump was villainized by half the country and paraded as the savior to the other half. And I just know Don Jr. as, like, he's my buddy. He likes to hunt, and we like to make the same type of jokes because he's hilarious. I mean, part of it is, like, he's hilarious, and the fact that, you know, they're in politics, their family obviously is, I think they're a great family. That's my own personal opinion. But you can sit down and have a normal conversation. I mean, he was at my house, my kids are crawling around on him, and we're like eating elk steak, and he's a normal guy. He's not a guy that's really stuffy and he's trying really hard not to make a mistake. Like, I can directly relate to him. And though we grew up very differently, like I grew up in a logging family in the middle of, you know, northern Idaho, and about as rural as you could get, and basically a trailer house. He grew up in a very different scenario, but we have commonality in the fact that we love the country, and more importantly, like, we just love being normal guys that have the same type of interests that can connect over not only what the country is doing, but what we're feeling as far as from the incompetence of what I would say is bureaucrats, right? I think is like, and now I'm transitioning more into political topics, which is, it's just like, I think COVID was it was a horrible thing that we had to go through as a country. But I think it was also one of the best things that we could have gone through for politics, because it exposed just the blatant incompetence of how much control incompetent people have over our daily lives. And if that didn't wake people up and go, dude, like I gotta like really emphasize accountability, liberty, like, you know, the system is kind of rigged to a certain degree. We've got to really like pay attention to who we're electing. We really do. I think we really, I hope at least it forced a lot of people to pay attention, like wake up. These people have too much control over our lives. Okay, how do we like rip apart the layers of incompetence, expose it for what it is, and then how do we fix it?
No, I think what a lot of people, they mistake, and they only look at Washington, D.C. to fix their problems. Right. Washington, D.C. was never designed to fix your problems. And if you don't believe me, go read the Federalist Papers. Washington, D.C. is supposed to be farther removed from anybody else, and then it's supposed to move very slowly, but not necessarily affect your daily lives. It's the local politics that affects your daily lives. And if people didn't understand that, there was a huge difference between what school district you lived in, if your kids are going to go to school or not. I've got 6 kids. I always joke by that because I say, well, the reason why I got 6 kids is because my wife couldn't leave me alone. Obviously, look at me. She always reminds me. Which
itself is a funny joke. Like, it's super funny.
But she also reminds me that 3 we adopted. So, ha ha. But if you didn't understand that, you didn't understand your city council and your mayor, how much power they have over your lives too, because you could be in the same county and one city would be open and one city was closed. We overlook local politics, and local politics affects your lives more than what you realize. And COVID 100% exposed that. What exposed more was when local politics became national news, and it forced Washington, D.C. to take a position on it. And that's when it exposed all how radical left everything had went. And so I think you're absolutely correct. I think 2 things actually happened for COVID. 1 is exposed it, and 2, it made probably guys like you and I who have worked nonstop. We spent a lot of days away from home. And then all of a sudden we slow down and we reconnect with our family. Not that we may have had a bad connection with them, but we actually are home with our family. I hadn't been home with my family ever. And then all of a sudden I'm home. And I mean, when I say home, I'm talking about home multiple days in a row. Right. And I'm not distracted, but I'm with the family because the world kind of stopped. And for me, I didn't know what I was missing. I had no idea what I was missing. And then it really made you think what else you're going to do and what your fight is. And so I think it made the whole country refocus a little bit. But going to the Trumps, right? Don is a hilarious, Don Jr. is a funny guy, right? I've only had the privilege of being around him a few times on the campaign trail. I've never had the personal interaction like you have. With President Trump, I have. President Trump, I consider a friend, and he is a funny human being, and someone that is genuinely caring, someone that when his grandkids come in, he's giving them Cokes and candy, and they just run in, they jump on his lap. Somebody that he loves on my kids as much as he loves on his own grandkids, and then he truly cares too. Just not to get too far down a rabbit trail, but just to share the personal side that the media doesn't get to see, or they choose not to look at, was the little things that he does all the time. And mind you, I'm just one example, but we have, like I said, we have 6 kids, and in my family, you wrestle and like it or wrestle and don't like it. So my boys and girls, they all wrestle. So you don't really get a choice. Right. We're not going to be a basketball family. I wrestled in college. My wife was a cheerleader and she was a gymnast. So height isn't in our, basketball is not in our future. So we're sawed off and solid. So for a cow, we'd call short and solid, but we're just not that old yet. So anyways, wrestling is our sport. And I have kids that are really good at it. I have 3 that are in college right now. All 3 of my boys, 2 wrestle for Oklahoma State, 1 wrestles for the University of Oklahoma. And the one of them that was wrestling for Oklahoma State in January 17th of 2020, he's wrestling in Newton, Kansas, takes a hit to the head. The kid was one of the best in the nation at the time. and had wrestled all over the world. I mean, literally wrestled all over the world by the time he was 14 years old, was undefeated internationally, just really a stud athlete. He gets hit in the head. He looks at me. He says, "Dad, I don't feel good," and he collapses. And his pulse dropped. They couldn't grab pulse off of him. His lips started turning blue. He had severe oxygen depletion. They rushed him to the hospital. 26 hours later, he wakes up, and he's not even the same kid. I mean, he's a totally different kid. He went from this extreme athlete to where he can't even touch his nose like this. He had to get a belt around him to help him walk. Asked him what year it is, couldn't tell you. Asked him who we were. He knew we were somebody, but he couldn't put mom and dad with it. Asked him what happened, couldn't tell. The only question he got right was Trump. They said, "Who was the president?" And he got this cocky look on his face and goes, "Trump." Now, I'm not offended by it. I'm just hurt that he knew who he was and didn't know who I was. But President Trump found it hilarious. So somehow that got leaked to the news. To this day, I don't know. And at the time, I didn't even care to research it because we were in pediatric ICU. Yeah. But within 3 hours, it was all over national news. And President Trump was one of the first people to call me. And he said, "Hey, what's going on? How can I help?" And I was a mess, man. I mean, my kid wasn't the same. I'm not a crier, but I am now. I mean, seriously, it changed me emotionally, and it's the most helpless feeling you had in your life. And anyways, President Trump, he goes, and let me get this right. He called me tough guy back then. And he goes, let me get this right. He didn't know who you were, but he remembered who I was, and he thought that was hilarious. And then when I told him how serious it was, his whole thing changed. And I said, "Hey, listen, we've got to go to California. They can't rehab him here. They want us in California in 24 hours to start rehab because it's vitally important." He says, "I'm sending my plane to you." And I said, "Well, he can't fly. He can't go over a certain height, altitude, so we got to drive. In fact, we can't even drive through Colorado. We're going to drop down and go through New Mexico, through Flagstaff." And I said, "So I'll let you know when we get there." And he says, "Well, don't worry about anything. We've got it taken care of." I was like, "Sir, we're good." I get down there 2 days later. He calls me. He says, "Hey, what's going on? How's my boy doing?" And for 18 months, the guy called every single week and wanted to check on Jim, want to know how Jim's doing. How's Jim doing? And then a month after he was there, he says, "Hey, I'm going to come to we're in Bakersfield, California." He said, "I'm going to come to Bakersfield and see him." So literally, President Trump, president at the time, in the middle of a campaign, this is in 2020, he comes to Bakersfield, California, not really someplace he needs a campaign.
Right.
And he lands, he does a rally, of course, but he did it in a hangar, real small deal. And he sees Jim down there in the chairs. At this time, Jim was still having very short-term memory loss. He was still struggling quite a bit because he went from a high school grade level to third grade level. I mean, he had to relearn everything, brother. I mean, everything you can think of. Plus, it stunted his growth. So we're not really tall anyways. I'm 5'9", barely over 5'9", and he's 5'3", because frontal lobe injury will stunt your growth when you're an adolescent. New thing I learned. Jeez. So anyways, President Trump called him on the stage, and right there in the middle, there's hundreds of cameras everywhere, right? President Trump just hugs on him, started loving on him, and started encouraging him. Now, he didn't care what was going on else. I mean, he was on stage. And then he kept Jim up there on stage with him the rest of the time, and told a little bit of his story, and then we walked backstage, and he was just loving on your kid. You know, for parents, someone showing affection to your kids, like true love to your kids, not some pervert, but right. Some true love to your kids. Hey, you just found a permanent friend yourself. Yeah. You know, that's somebody that you're willing to go to battle with, and anyways, he just hugging on him, loving on him, just encouraging him, and his team kept coming to him and saying, "Hey, sir, we got to go, and did this 2 or 3 times. And President Trump turned around to him and said, "Hey, guarantee you that plane won't leave without me." That was it. And you know, and that's President Trump. He set Jim on his lap and just started encouraging him. And I mean, every week for 18 months. The President of the United States, even while he was going through the campaign, even after the campaign, even with everything that was going on, he never failed to call. And every time he called, he always wanted to pay for it. I'd never let him pay for it, but he always wanted to do something. And then when Jim got released, he wanted us to come to Mar-a-Lago. And so all the family went down there and we're visiting with him. And President Trump stood up, gave Jim a hug, and he says, "You know why I love your dad?" Jim's like, "No." And he says, "Because of you. I love him because of you. Because I see the love he has for you."
Wow.
You know, you see a lot of billionaires, millionaires, and less than millionaires that have kids that don't really turn out that well. And if you need to know anything about President Trump, look at his kids. Look at the way that they love him. Look at the way that his grandkids love him. Here's this guy that has a ton of things going on, but he's never too busy to remember family. That tells you that a guy's got his priorities right. And it's something I probably mess up with, something I strive to be better at. And I think if he can do that, there's no excuse why the rest of us can't make time for our family. Because if you lose that priority, I think you've lost everything. And I believe he probably thinks the same way, because I've learned as much from him about how to be a father. I'm not saying he's the most, moral man out there, but as far as being a father and a leader, the guy's got that right. And I can follow that into any situation.
Well, I think you're 100% right. I think there's a lot of people that should be looking at that as an example for, how your kids turn out, how your grandkids turn out. Your family is a direct representation of the work that you've put into them, like a lot of times, right? So, it definitely has shaped my opinion, because I do have a relationship with his son, and it's definitely shaped my opinion. And for years, I was like, just block it out. I honestly, I don't really pay attention too much to mainstream media regardless, because after a year of, negative story after negative story, you're like, okay, now I get it. I get it. Right. It's like, and now when you look at, like, I don't know if, did you watch the episode with him and Joe? Did you watch the 3-hour Rogan podcast? Yeah. It's like 3 hours, and there's no, there's no way that Kamala could have done. He was exactly right. There's no way she could have done 3 hours with Joe, period. No way. And I don't think there's been, and I think he's 100% right. I don't think there's been another presidential candidate that has gotten as much negative press, has been accused of the things that he's been accused of, has been under a constant layer of attack. And by the way, has continued to prevail, because most of them would duck and cover. They would literally run away and find the deepest, darkest hole to drive into. And we've seen it multiple times. If you don't, like, you can just do the research on presidential candidates, and then how either the media has turned against them based on either the RNC or the DNC, because I think both parties have done it. They've definitely gone. I don't know what these balloons are, but like both parties have done it, and you can watch, and we saw it. I think we saw it, during the first campaign when they targeted Tulsi and took Tulsi completely out from a Democratic perspective, like completely out. She held everybody on that debate stage accountable, which I thought was it was awesome. Like, one, I love, Tulsi and I've been friends for a long time, so it's like irrelevant to me, like what party she was on. But like, if you didn't want to put another coin in that jukebox after watching those debates and what she did to Hillary and Kamala and everybody else on the stage, and then watch the entire machine turn against her, which was completely insane. And for people that I don't think are paying attention, I think more people now are paying attention than they have been, but for a long time they haven't. They've believed mainstream media for so long, and it's directly contributed to the false, and of course it's false information, but it's also negative propaganda that can persuade elections. So that's my question to you, is like, how much is this a factor that you guys talk about? Because you're on the trail and you're obviously in the middle of this stream navigating down this river every day. How big of a factor and how much of a talking point is it behind the scenes that you guys are talking about mainstream media?
Yeah, I don't, not that much.
Okay.
It really, because it's something we've always dealt with. The most important thing is to hold people grounded. So like Tulsi, she'll call me her brother and I call her my sister. We're that close. We came in together in Congress, extremely, extremely close friends. I love her family, and I'm scared to death of her sister. I mean, she's I can't use the language, but she's bad in a good way.
Yeah,
And you know, but her whole family is just awesome people. And when you saw Tulsi go through that, and if she wasn't well grounded, it would have probably disrupted her.
yeah.
But because she had family and friends around her, and we spent hours talking through the whole process, she has great parents that are just raised awesome kids, and she had a circle around them, and so she didn't have to. She had to refocus. She had to rethink about what she's going to do moving forward because it wasn't that where she's at today. I promise you, she wasn't thinking that in 2020.
Right.
But it shows that she was well grounded. And President Trump, when you see the same thing with him, is he's well grounded because if he wasn't, this would get to him. So mainstream media, what they try to do is they try to scare you and run you off. They try to destroy you because if you have something tangible, they will run you, which is what they did during the strong woke movement, right? They runt companies. They runt people's lives. Because if you didn't agree with them, they would X you out, and that's what that's what they're trying to do with Tim Sheehy and his businesses right now. That's what they try to do with us, and that's why you have just politicians a lot of times that run for office because if you have something to lose, it's a dangerous battleground to step on, and because once you step in it, everything is open. Because in politics, it doesn't have to be real. In public, you can sue for being slandered. In public, you can go after people that goes after your companies. And when you're a public figure, especially a politician, it just has to be assumed. There's no truth. All you have to do is say, "I was told by a source."
Yeah.
And they can run with whatever they want to. And it destroys you. So for us, what we do is when we see somebody that's getting attacked like that, especially like Tim Sheehy or Bernie Moreno or Dave McCormick or Sam Brown. I mean, they're trying to make out Sam Brown as some villain. I mean, come on, man. Sam, the guy is burned over 80% of his life because he was blown up in Afghanistan.
Right.
I mean, how do you go after him? But they do. What we do is we circle our wagons around them. And we just try to encourage them, and we try to tell them to ignore it and don't pay attention to it. I listen to a lot of podcasts. Very seldom do I ever listen to news unless I'm about ready to go on that program.
Right.
And that includes Fox. I'm not saying anything bad about Fox or Newsmax or CNN or anything else. And my parents, man, I tell my parents, it's just not worth being in a bad mood. I want to be happy, man. I want to make fun of you. If we were in studio, I promise you I'd be making fun of you. I don't know what I'd be making fun of you about, but I promise you I would be. And
you got lots. Sure there's lots to work with, man.
I could find something, and I'm sure you'd do the same with me. I choose to be happy. My glass is not half full in the morning or half empty. It's half full. And when you listen to news, it just drags you down. And it beats you down. So for us in the political world, most of us we need to know what's going on, but we don't allow it to consume you. If you allow it to consume you, it gets you off your game. It's like getting in someone's head. When I used to fight them or whatever the situation was that I'd find myself in, if I could make you mad, if I could get in your head, I win. And that's all mainstream media is. It's trying to get in your head and make you win. Because if they can't win on policy, they want to win by fear. And fear is a very powerful tool. And fear can get you on someone's side and you don't even know why you're there. You just know you fear the other side more.
Yeah, it's one of those feelings that can drive people. Well, one, it'll completely eliminate them from the national stage, right? I mean, 100%. I've seen it multiple times. I mean, just even in the 10 years that I've been, doing this business. And I mean, I've been a direct recipient of it, right? It's like the New York Times did an article on me 3-4 years ago, whenever it was, 83 different like inaccuracies, 83. And what they were trying to do, I mean, blatantly what they were trying to do, at least from my perspective, was somehow villainize me or my company or whomever, because they saw the company on a very specific trajectory. We were very pro-Trump. Like I've never not been. And so, of course, what do they have to do? They have to try to put a hole in your game.
That's right.
I've had to do very similar things. I've had to basically say, hey, turn out the white noise, focus on what matters. We got a big mission here. And then you have, to your point, like you have a 360 degree, what we call in the military is 360 degree security. Like I'll text my buddies or call somebody and they're like, yeah, who cares? Like, just fucking keep moving, man. And
no, that's true.
That's just keep moving. Who cares? Like, like let them say whatever they're going to say, but focus on what you're good at.
Well, a song that I keep going through my head all the time on it is if you're going through hell, keep on walking. You might get out for the devil even knows you're there. It's true, man. Just don't stop. If I'm just moving and I'm going through the storm, it's going to get over before long. By the way, just a little side note here. I invest because I have to, especially since I can't run the companies day to day. I invest, and one of the worst decisions I've ever made is not investing with you guys early on, because there was a friend of mine named Justin Napolitano. I don't know if you know him. You know Justin?
I know Steve Napolitano. I know Justin Napolitano by proxy. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you know Stevie?
I don't.
Oh, okay. Well, Stevie's his wife.
Okay.
Justin, just remarkable. I have 4 Purple Hearts. He retired.
Oh, of course. Yes, of course I do. Sorry.
Right.
Yes.
I thought he knew you pretty well.
Yes.
So Justin's my brother. I'm closer to him than my brother. When I was doing special assignments outside DOD, Justin and I, we worked a couple missions together, and I just really, really like the guy. The guy has saved my life. And but anyways, he told me about you when you guys were first starting up years ago, investors. And I was like, man, Justin, I don't know. I don't know him coming. He's like, come on, man. I'm telling you, I know these guys. I didn't do it. And I've sat back and I've seen your coffee cans around. I even keep my coins in your old coffee cans.
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, that's the one that got away.
Wow. It's so interesting because 10 years of this. And I like I said, I try not to be as like, I try not to say a ton of things politically, but it's kind of hard not to, right? You're kind of like forced into this situation where, especially with the company or not the company, the country at times it's kind of forcing you to almost take a side. But with what I saw years ago, which was my point, was like I was walking into coffee companies, and I'm a hardcore coffee guy. Like this was like something that, as a Green Beret, being into coffee and being into like bougie pour over coffee, that's not something that's going to let you just get out without unscathed. And like you hipster idiot, like why are you so into this stuff? And I'd go to coffee festivals and things like that in like San Francisco and Seattle. And I went into this coffee shop in San Francisco and they had a picture of like Che Guevara on the side of the wall. And I was like, why can I not find a coffee company that like speaks to my values? You can get a great cup of coffee, and this isn't a commercial for the company. This is just the genesis of it. Because, I'm throwing around carbines and like, doing what I was doing in my previous profession. I was like, I want a place where there's like an American flag or a copy of the Constitution, and there's a flag out front that celebrates our country, this beautiful, incredible experiment that we started, not we, but our founding fathers started a couple hundred years ago.
100% we. Yeah.
I don't want to celebrate like some thug from South America that people think is cool. Like I just don't. And that was the genesis of this. And like, I was just trying to pay a mortgage, man. I was like, this is going to be really cool. Like I'm going to have a gun shop on one side. I'm going to have a coffee shop in there. You can come in, get a cup of, some espresso, maybe go to the range. I was just trying to pay my mortgage. Like I didn't have any money. I didn't have any investment capital. I wasn't started by a bunch of private equity guys. Like this is like built out of my garage. And to this day, it gives me a really immense sense of pride because like you get people coming in and they're my people. That's what I keep saying. I'm like, hey man, they're my people. And people come through the doors and they're like, this is awesome. You got an American flag out front. This is a place for me to feel like I've got a spot to drink, a cup of coffee without feeling like I've got to leave or, man, I got to get my cup of coffee and get the hell out of here because some dude making it looks like he's building bikes in the 1800s and, speaking, the Marxist Leninist crap. So I digress. I went on a tangent there. Sorry.
Well, no. I'm sitting here thinking, dadgum, I should have called you because see, I would have invested if I would have heard you say that. No, I'm serious because I'm the same way. I grew up having to get up early, and I spent a lot of time in the dairy and milking and dairy barns, and I started drinking coffee when I was real little because that's how we kept our hands warm, and by the time I was in 5th, 6th grade, I was going to the teacher's lounge and making coffee for them, and in middle school and in high school, I'm not kidding. I always drink coffee. Now, in 2020, I quit drinking coffee because Jim can't have any stimulus, and because of the head injury, he can't. Alcohol and any type of stimulus affects him really hard.
Right.
And so I was like, dadgummit, if he can't drink coffee and he can't have any type of stimulus, then I'm going to too, because I don't want him to think he have to be successful. And I'm very serious by this. But I love coffee. I love the smell of coffee. I love it just always has been. And I'm the same way. My wife and I, we used to drive around and we would go into coffee shops. I mean, as we were traveling, because I'm kind of this old school too. I collect a lot of antiques, whatever, make fun of me. I don't care. But I go around and we would go into towns and that's the first thing we do is find a coffee shop. Now, I like good black coffee. She likes creamer and add coffee. Right. There's two different things. Yeah. But it does frustrate you because you couldn't find a coffee shop you walk into and you're going, this doesn't belong in here, but you deal with it. And I don't know if I was in there for the coffee or pastries half the time. And that, I'm not kidding. If you would have said that to me, maybe I would be better off.
I was going to ask you, like, I had a couple questions I wanted to ask you was like, because you're
wide open.
And I don't know exactly, so you can correct me on this because there's only like 6 Native Americans, I believe, like that are serving. Like, is it across Congress and Senate? Like, because there's not very many. It's a very, very small group of people.
Yeah. So when I don't look Cherokee. I actually am, and sometimes hardcore Native Americans, they're like, "You're not Cherokee." I was like, "I am too. I can't control my parents' love." They fell in love with other people, so don't make fun of me. But no, my family, we've been in Oklahoma since the late 1830s because we came over with the first walk. It's called the Trail of Tears, right? We came over with the first walk, and so in the Senate, I'm the first Native American since 2005 to serve there.
Since 2005, seriously.
Since 2005, yeah. And I'm the first Native American from Oklahoma to serve since 1925, which is really crazy if you think about it, because we have the highest concentration of Native Americans than any other place in the country. I mean, in Oklahoma, that's where everybody was relocated to. And in the Senate in the House when I first got elected, it was just myself and Tom Cole, who's a congressman from the Norman area outside of Oklahoma City, and he's Chickasaw. So at first it was just him and I. We were the only 2 Native Americans, and now I believe there's 4 others that serve. And I can't remember. I know Sharice Davis out of Kansas City. I think Josh Burkeen, the guy who took my spot, may be Choctaw. I'm not 100% sure on that. And then there's a couple others. I'm forgetting who they are.
Is that,
But that's not the big deal to me. I mean, listen,
no.
I never knew I was special for being Cherokee until I went to Washington D.C. because where I'm from, everybody's Native American, and
Right.
so what I say is they're Indian or they want to be Indian, and I didn't know there was any difference between healthcare services because I grew up always going to IHS, which is Indian Health Services.
Yeah.
That you just if you're always in that area, you don't really know that there's any difference. My family didn't travel a whole lot. I mean, we worked. It's what we did, and we weren't poor, but we didn't have extra,
Yeah.
and we always worked, and so we just kind of stayed close to where we're at. And so when I went to Washington D.C., everybody was making a big deal about it, and I was like, oh, okay.
They're making a big deal out of it. It's funny. I grew up right next to the Nez Perce Indian Reservation, so like a lot of my really close friends were from the Nimipu tribe, and it's probably one of the only GWAT vets that the Nez Perce Indian tribe gave me a warrior's reception powwow coming home from Iraq on my first rotation. And,
that's cool. So you're more Native American than Elizabeth Warren.
Yeah, well, that's probably for sure, right? I mean, I think 99.9% of the United States is probably more Native American. But
do you realize how big of I mean, you probably do, but how big of an honor that is that they would do that to you for you? That's
absolutely,
almost unheard of.
Yeah, it's and it was me and a very small group of guys, but growing up, like you didn't really, you knew there was a difference, right, between the reservation or the res and our town, but there wasn't any difference the way that we were playing together, right? We didn't actually differentiate between like, well, you're this and I'm that. We're just like kids growing up together, growing up and experiencing the inland Northwest. I grew up in Lewiston, Idaho, and but that Native American history was such an important part of like where I grew up because it was very prominent in even the academics, like the history of the tribe. And then as I've gotten older, I've read more about that area of the world and kind of like what happened to the Nez Perce and Chief Joseph. I don't know how much you know about Chief Joseph, but he's a pretty remarkable guy as far as his ability to speak, communicate clearly, like, and not only forecast events, but then think about it from a leadership perspective. He had a very interesting way of viewing the future of what I would say is the United States at that time, and then where the Native Americans were going to be, and then where they needed to be, like post the collision between the two cultures. But it has been it's been a very prominent part of my life just growing up there. Was it a prominent, like, was Cherokee culture and history, was that a prominent part of your life, or was it just part of your life?
That's interesting. It was part of my life, but it was always part of my life. So it's always prominent, right? It never was not part of my life. I don't remember a time of it not hearing stories. I mean, I when I first went to school, they taught Cherokee. I learned the alphabet, the Cherokee alphabet, alongside the the English alphabet. We go to, the generation has passed, but my grandparents' generation, they spoke Cherokee a lot, and so we'd go to church. And I always tell people, if you ever want to hear Amazing Grace, and something that'll just hit you hard, to hear it in Cherokee. And so it's always part of me. I don't remember it ever not being part of it. But what you're talking about by the chief is that's common, and it's interesting what's going on. And I know this is a sidebar, but it's interesting what's going on right now in Native American politics, or Indian politics is what I say a lot. Is generational thinking is the way they always thought. They would think 100 years. Everything was generational thinking. It's not about my time. Like King Hezekiah in the Bible, he was like, as long as there's peace in my time, I'm good. Right. Well, most chiefs or chairmen or governors, it depends on what term they want to use. They thought generational. Now that businesses, a lot of tribes are getting very wealthy. Some are not. Some of the plains that are on reses, they're struggling, which we're hopefully to help economically get them down the road. That's another story, but But the ones now that are very successful, they're starting to change the way they're thinking, and they're thinking on a business term, and that's today. And
Right.
so many corporations, they don't think generational. They're not thinking 100 years. They're thinking financials today. They're thinking financials this quarter. They're thinking maybe a 5-year expansion plan, but they're not thinking 100 years.
Mm.
And tribes had always thought generational like that. And one tribe that does an excellent job with that is the Choctaws. Chief Batten, which is Choctaws is a wealthy tribe too. But Chief Batten is a gentleman that I have a tremendous amount of respect for, because every time I talk to him, and they're talking about legislation that's going to affect tribes moving forward, he's always thinking and speaking generational.
Mm.
And that is, and when you speak to a lot of reservations, they're thinking the same way. But when you start talking to some of the wealthier tribes, they've lost a little bit of that. And so it actually touched me when he said that, because you just don't hear it very much. And I would have loved to have met the guy, because, I mean, obviously it's not possible, but I would love to have met the guy, because I those are people that you can learn from.
Yeah, I think that like that's part of the problem with the American political culture, is that they're thinking in 2 and 4 year terms. They're thinking about election cycles.
Yep.
You know, from an executive position from the president's office, they're thinking, are they really thinking strategically from 100 years down the road?
No.
Because I think the Chinese are, for sure.
Yep.
Like the Chinese are thinking 100 years. I guarantee
that's
Putin's
the One
thinking
Belt,
100
One Road
years.
initiative. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that there's something to be learned from a strategic perspective, because, you know, as we look at, you know, international politics and our strategic position as the United States, and then where our position is and where the future is for the country, I see a lot of politicians and definitely bureaucrats, but I see a lot of people that don't accept a lot of accountability. They want to push the accountability off on the bureaucrats, which I think Mike Lee did a really good job on Tucker's show a couple months ago, kind of explaining the bifurcation of responsibilities from the legislative and the executive. But more importantly, what he was talking about was politicians have given themselves the ability to blame bureaucrats versus taking accountability. And that, I wanted to just get your 2 cents on that, because you see it from the inside. You know, do you see a lot of politicians really wanting to step up and take accountability, or are you in the minority, you guys?
So, like I said, I'll go back to this. We all make
Yeah.
decisions based on our life experience and the way we're raised, right? So, life experience wise, I used to buy businesses. I started buying companies when I was 23 years old, and we'd buy failing companies. Now, my mindset on buying companies have changed. We try to buy successful companies, but failing companies. And what I would do when I'd go in there is I would find the core of that company. There was something in that company that was successful at one point, and they just added layers and layers and layers on top. It was like an onion. They just layered it up. And if I could get a company that was failing, one, I'm getting it on a strong discount. But the first thing I'd do is I'd peel all the layers off. As my team would say, is I'd throw out the papers and catch them all in the air. But what I'm doing is I'm trying to get back to the mission of what that company was about and make it profitable. And my goal was to make it profitable within 30 days. And because there was profit in that company, and I could typically see it beforehand because I'd look at the financials and do all that, right? But I would peel the onions back. Same thing with the United States right now. We're running a $1.8 trillion deficit. Now, we're spending $1.8 trillion more than we're bringing in, and we're the wealthiest nation in the world. And I travel all over the place. And you're not wrong by you saying that we don't need to look at cycles, 2 years, 4 years, and possibly 8 years. I was just in the Middle East last week, and I was visiting with MBZ, president of UAE, who I consider a friend, King Abdullah, president of Jordan, who, when we're not on recording, I'll share a very interesting story with him and Justin and I back in 2016 on how he bailed us out of a mess. I mean, it's a cool story. And then we went to Qatar, and we were all over the place meeting with leaders. All of them talk about our political system is too finicky. It changes. We can't be dependent on it because we don't know what one cycle is going to do to the next. And what Congress has done, because we do that, we're always running. We have to build layers of protection on front of us. Mm-hmm. But we've created so many layers that now we can't even get control of the government. And before we can even think about getting the deficit under control, we're going to have to peel those onion layers back. We're going to get back to the core. What's the core? Go back to the Federalist Papers. Go back to what the core mission of our country was. Did we have all these agencies? No. And in fact, it was very clear about where these regulations are supposed to lie to the most part anyways. They're supposed to lie in the state. They're supposed to be closer down to the people, because you can't think that some bubble in Washington, D.C. can possibly know what's going on in Montana, Oklahoma, Nevada, South Dakota, North Dakota, Alaska, Hawaii. I don't care. Pick a state. No one is going to be able to regulate your state from Washington, D.C. because they don't live there. They don't understand it. And then when you start talking about controlling the purse strings, Congress doesn't control the purse strings anymore. There's zero chance we can control the purse strings. And now I'm going to get into a little bit of the weeds here a second.
Please.
But do you know how most states, states have to balance their budget. They can't go in debt because they don't have a printing machine, right? So they have to have a balanced budget every single year. Do you know how most states handle that? They do line item appropriations, meaning that every single penny has to be accounted for. Well, my Lord, who would think that every penny should have to be accounted for? I mean, because I'm sure you don't account for every penny in your business, right? I mean, you just let people just spend money however they want to.
However they want.
You don't even care about financial statements, but you also appropriate every dollar. So if you want to expand someplace, you're going to invest in that area. If you're going to build a new company, or you're going to buy new companies, or you're going to build a new warehouse, you're going to appropriate dollars for that, and you're going to look at that, and you're going to keep it on a budget, because you're going to keep people accountable. You're not just going to tell a manager or superintendent or an executive to say, hey, go build a building. I don't care what you spend, just go do it, right? We're going to give you a budget of $1 billion. I don't care what you build with it, right? You don't do it. We need to do states. States do line item appropriations, and at the same time, they also do line item veto. Well, we messed up several years ago when we had the New Deal with America underneath Newt Gingrich, which, not saying what he did was wrong. What he did was right at the time, but Congress has Congress really has a problem about overreacting. And we do it for political purposes instead of really thinking about the consequences moving down ahead. So when he did a new contract with America, what he did is he took away earmarks. Earmarks is a bad thing. If I were to ask your audience who likes earmarks, no one would raise their hand. But what is earmarks? Earmarks is line item appropriations. Now, they got abused because we were building bridges to nowhere, and they were being used to buy votes. But the dollars were being appropriated. Mm-hmm. The way Congress has to appropriate dollars now is that we appropriate a budget to the agency, and each year, by the way, the agencies automatically increase their budget, and we give them a bundle of money, and then we ask them, pretty please, can you spend it this way, this way, this way, or this way? We don't appropriate the dollars to them. Who sets the agenda to appropriate it is now the President of the United States, because who runs that agency is a person appointed by the President of the United States. So Congress can never control the purse strings if we don't do line item appropriations, which in politics is called earmarks. Mm-hmm. We have to appropriate every single dollar. And until we start doing that, we're just giving the agencies the ability to run rogue. But then again, to look back at the agencies, do we really need all these agencies? Can the state not regulate themselves better?
I think that you're 100% right. I mean, I don't think that we need half these agencies.
No.
I don't think that we need half the federal spending. So I'm in that camp.
So what are we spending $1.8 trillion above our budget, which is several trillion dollars to begin with? What are we spending all that money on? And how can Congress ever get their hands on it if we don't go back to line item appropriations? Mm-hmm. Leave earmarks out of it. It's kind of like I don't compromise who I am. I negotiate, but I don't compromise. There's a difference, right? Compromise is now all of a sudden a dirty word. Negotiations, everybody wants you to negotiate. Same thing with earmarks. Earmarks is a dirty word, but let's go to line item appropriations. If states can balance their budget every single year by line item appropriations, then the federal government can do the exact same thing too. If we just balance our budget and we hold our deficit to zero, or even if we just hold spending levels even for a few years, we'll be able to start paying things off. Right now, we're spending almost $1 trillion in debt every year, and Congress has literally deferred or has what's the best word I can find here? Congress is either deferred or just it gave away all their authority.
Right.
And we have no authority anymore. And we bring these agencies in and we get mad at them. We talk to them, we make a big show, and it's all over the news because we have some cute soundbite about, talking down to the person. And at the same time, the person is looking at us going, well, if you do your job, you wouldn't even be upset at me. You hired me to do your job. So
that's an interesting topic, because when does the national deficit become a national security issue? Meaning, like, now, when does it jeopardize? Yeah, exactly. Right. I think you're 100% right. I think this jeopardizes our ability to be a sovereign nation, and more importantly, to compete on the international stage and then meet and exceed our strategic objectives for the next 100 years. I think the debt becomes a security issue. I think, are you in a camp of conservatives that are looking at this as this is a national security issue, or is it kind of 50-50 in the conservative camp? Because that's one of the big questions I had for you, which was,
I think most people, I have a different look at this, right? Originally, when I looked at this, when I first got in Congress, I was like, okay, we have to invest in our country. We got to invest in the military. We got to invest in infrastructure, because I believe in investing in a company. You have to spend money to start making money to some degree, right? You got to invest in Black Rifle, or you would never be able to move anywhere. And I have no issues with that. But at some point, you got to start having the returns. You got to start seeing your P&Ls and your ROIs start coming back in and working together. And so at first I was like, let's invest and start seeing allowing the country to make the money instead of us thinking we're going to tax more. I always say this, Congress is never designed to create a job. They're supposed to create an environment for entrepreneurs to create those jobs, like yourself, like myself. Now, though, it is 100% a national security issue. We're spending more on the national debt to service, not pay down, service national debt, than we are in the military. If you look at any economist that is a world economist that looks at any country around the world, when you see those two matrix pass each other, there's a crisis. And we're in that area right now. The only time this has happened is when we've come out of a war, like World War II, right? Mm-hmm. We brought down our defense spending, but we had ran a tremendous amount of debt. That only lasted for about 10 years. And even coming out of Korea, we didn't have that same swing. We had debt, but it wasn't unmanageable to where we almost are to this day. So it's 100% a national security issue. And if we don't get it under control, we're in trouble. So does that mean you got to cut defense spending? This isn't a time to cut defense spending, but there's a lot of other areas that you can save money in. And once again, I go back to peeling back the onions. What is the core value? What's our core value? What is the core mission of this country that we have to do? Because when you're trying to get out of debt, you put things in categories, which, my Lord, I've had a lot of debt in my life. You put things in things I have to do and things I get to do.
Right.
And right now, as a country, need to go, what do we have to do, not what do we get to do? And we're doing a lot of things we shouldn't be messing with, and we should be looking at ourselves, which is where President Trump goes into America first. We got to be getting back to that core principle.
Amen. Thank you so much. I wanted to be very respectful of your time. I can't thank you enough for being on the show with me. Please, you have an open invite. Anytime you want to come back, you text me. We'll put you on the show.
Love it.
Anything you want to talk about. I can't thank you enough. I greatly appreciate the time we've had.
Absolutely, brother. Appreciate you.
Thank you. Bye.